Welcome. My name is Mark. I'm the host of this channel and the creator of all the works presented on it. Please note that I retain the copyright to my writings. Viewers of dramas, dreams, and drollery are invited to enjoy them, but not to use them for commercial purposes. The 5 stories offered since October 1 could all be described as relatively pleasing and normal. In contrast, the tale I now present may be pleasing to some, but is certainly not normal to anyone. The name of it is 9 Lives Mall. This narrative comes from the recesses of my mind where one can find cobwebs and dark shadows. With the word mall in the title, it's hard to imagine how this might be possible. This is Christmas shopping season, and despite the attraction of online vendors, many shoppers still patronize malls, which, in their minds, convey images of gaiety, bright lights, and good cheer. My advice, do not for one instant consider doing your Christmas shopping at the 9 Lives Mall. Here is the story. What outrageous, convention-defying act shall we perform this morning? Asked Tony while seated in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in West Palm Beach. Flicking the ashes of a Marlboro on the floor rather than in the ashtray, Allison replied with a stifled yawn. I don't know. Right now, I want some coffee. Let's go out in the veranda. This was an atypical response from one known to her inner circle of friends as an exemplar of vigor and mischief. But the willowy woman had a slight hangover from the previous night's bar hopping. Rising from the chair, she pushed back long blonde hair from her beautiful face. Tony, shorter, brunette, and less comely, but with a voluptuous body, noted the numerous male eyes fixed on her leather halter. Crossing the lobby, she paused momentarily and bent over to scratch a knee. When a wide-eyed man leaned forward in an armchair, Allison blew smoke in his face. At the large glass doors that led outside, Tony tugged at her friend's sleeve. Do you see that old witch sitting all alone at the table? Yeah? She looks so prim and proper. We can have some fun with her. Here's what we're going to do. While Tony outlined her plan, the elderly woman was enjoying a cup of Earl Grey and the cool breeze that swept in from the beach. A matron of Cincinnati society, Erica Davenport, relished these moments of serene privacy before her slumbering husband arose to suggest more active pursuits. As she reached for the newspaper, 2 young women in immodest attire presented themselves at her table. Do you mind? Tony asked. She and Allison sat down before the woman could respond. Caught off guard, Mrs. Davenport did not know what to say. To her, such behavior was an unaccustomed act of rudeness. Glancing about, she noted that all the tables on the veranda were unoccupied except for one in the possession of an Asian lady. She stammered, yes, please join me. The intruders then initiated a dialogue that completely excluded Mrs. Davenport. Do you have any cocaine left? Yeah, a little. I thought maybe we could go over to Hank's place tonight and have some fun. Dave and Jerry are going to be there. Jerry, now there's a hunk. Remember the time when he and I drove naked on his motorcycle at the beach? At this point, Mrs. Davenport stood up and walked swiftly toward the lobby. The 2 women laughed loudly. Tony got off a parting shot at the old witch. You're invited too. With the departure of the pawn, the mischievous pair abruptly changed their manner. Allison sought sympathy for her hangover. Tony complained of boredom. In time, the conversation evolved into a diatribe against life. What's the use of living? Asked Allison. There's never any real fun. We get a few kicks now and then from something like this, but they don't last long. Let's face it, we've done everything. Cocaine, alcohol, sex, travel, daredevil stunts. None of that does anything for me anymore. Yeah, you're right. And when you own a Ferrari, a yacht, a Swiss chalet, and a closet full of Balenciaga, what more is there? Without invitation, the Asian woman walked over and took a seat at their table. She wore a blue brocaded dress that exhibited the peacock in gold and silver. Her hair and makeup were the products of careful attention. Looking straight into the eyes of the young women, she offered them hope. My name is Madam Ling. I believe you need my services. The friends looked at one another. Tony thought to herself, what's up with this witch? What sort of services do you offer? Inquired Allison. Perhaps you can think of me as a travel agent. We don't want to go anywhere, said Tony. We travel all the time. Yes, I gathered that from your conversation, but I'm not recommending Biarritz or Chiang Mai. What I propose is a most unusual destination. Neither you nor your friends have ever heard of it before. What's it called? Asked Allison. Before I answer that question, I want to be certain that you are the sort of people that I think you are. Tell me if this is a proper description. You are bored with life. You feel that you've reached the limit of pleasure in this world. There are no more thrills to satisfy you. That about sums it up, said Tony. Suppose you had the opportunity to do something novel and extremely exciting, but the adventure entailed great risks, life-threatening risks. Would you seize that opportunity? Hey, we've already tried mountain climbing and street racing. Can your adventure provide more thrills than that? It can. Then count me in, said Allison. Me too, said Tony. Madame Ling smiled and said, good. Then prepare to go this evening. Be at Dock 9 at 11 p.m. I'll have contracts and instructions ready for you at that hour. As the women started to walk away, Tony stopped and looked back. By the way, what's the name of this place we're going to? It's called the Nine Lives Mall. Curiosity ruled the jaded pair for the remainder of the morning. By midday, they were having second thoughts. At lunch, Tony said, maybe we were a little too quick to accept that woman's offer. We didn't ask enough questions. Yeah, like just where is this mall and how long are we going to be there? But I'm really curious, aren't you? Madame Ling's package includes a strange combination of elements, a boat, a mall, and danger. Did it cross your mind that we're being tricked into something sinister? Perhaps that woman operates a slave trafficking operation, for example. We go off on a boat, and that's the last anyone sees of us. I hadn't thought about that. So what do? Do we give it up? I don't want to. I got an idea. Let's buy a gun and take it with us. Tonight we'll go to the dock. If everything looks okay, we'll go. If not, we'll stay. No one can force us if we're armed. Good idea. At 11:15 that evening, a taxi deposited the adventuresses at Dock 9. Dim lighting along the waterfront made the women very uneasy. The absence of Madame Ling intensified their discomfort. The only people in view were two men standing beside a weather-beaten boat of inferior quality. Tony and Allison approached cautiously, the latter tightly gripping the revolver in her jacket pocket. Broad smiles on the faces of the men reduced their anxiety. Good evening, ladies. My name is Felipe. I shall take you to your destination. And I am Alfredo. Madame Ling could not be here this evening. She asked me to handle the paperwork. Here are the contracts. Alfredo extended a clipboard with the documents attached, and held a flashlight while the women signed. Departing, the man remarked, "Please read your copies carefully." Tony turned to Felipe and inquired, "Are we going in this old tub?" "Yes, this is my boat. But don't worry, it's more comfortable than it appears. You will like your sleeping quarters. We are going to an island. It's not a long journey. We will be there before dawn. Go down below. I have some hot coffee waiting for you. In the morning, I'll explain all that you need to know." Tony turned to Felipe and inquired, Mistake. Tony woke up first. Through a porthole in the early morning light, she could see that the boat was moored to a dock on an island. She poured herself a cup of coffee from a dispenser in the corner. While sipping the hot brew, she picked up the contract. Her eyes scanned rapidly down 6 pages. At the bottom of the 7th, one paragraph caught her attention. "Hey, Allison, wake up!" Her companion responded very slowly. "What is it?" "You got to look at this. It says in this contract that in the event of our deaths, they can dispose of our bodies as they see fit." "What?" Allison sat up abruptly. "What's that all about?" "Well, Madame Ling talked about risks. I guess she was serious. The bad thing is that we don't really know what we're getting into." Allison got out of bed and looked out the porthole. Doesn't look so dangerous to me. It looks pretty ordinary. Kind of reminds me of Barbados or the Bahamas." Tony looked too. "You're right. How could there be a mall here? The island seems deserted. Where would the customers come from?" At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Felipe entered with a smile on his face. "Welcome, ladies, to Isla Perdida. In English, that means Lost Island. It's an appropriate name. You won't find this island on a map or navigational chart. I'm the only person who knows the way here from the mainland." "So when are we going to the mall?" asked Tony. Felipe smiled. "Soon, but don't be in such a hurry. I have a good breakfast for you. And then, before you go, I must provide you with the rules." Eggs, coffee, toast, and fresh fish satisfied the stomachs and enlivened the spirits of the young women. By the time the guide began the orientation, they were ready for anything. Allison even whispered into Tony's ear, "Now, just how deadly can this be?" Despite these words of confidence, Tony could see that her friend was nervous. Leading them ashore, Felipe supplied a set of rules. "You may study this later, but I'll summarize the rules for you now. In this mall, you will find 10 stores. That's all. Once you enter the mall, there is no turning back. You must visit all 10, one by one. The mall has a single exit with a steel door that will open only if you place in a slot proof of entry tickets from all of the 10 stores. Sale clerks with whom you must interact will provide you with the tickets. Of the 10 stores, 9 are perfectly harmless, although they may not seem that way. The 10th store is extremely dangerous. Unless you are very clever, you may die. Like cats, you will have 9 lives. By the way, one of the rules is that you may fire no more than 5 bullets from your gun." "How did you know that we had a gun?" Allison asked. "Oh, everyone who comes up here has a gun. Now take a look up there high on the hill. You see a dark shadow about halfway up?" "Yes," said both women. "That's the entrance to the mall." "Good luck. I'll be going now. Oh, one last thing. Don't change your minds and remain on the beach for a rescue boat. It won't come unless you go to the mall first." "But when will you come back?" asked Allison. "Today is Tuesday. If all goes well, I'll be back on Friday. Madame Ling will notify me if I am to return. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I rarely have to return as scheduled." I remember a man about 2 years ago who did make it back, but he was out of his head. Poor man. I had to take him to a hospital. They said he'd probably be there for the rest of his life. Making an about face, Felipe went directly to the boat and then sailed away. On the beach, the women watched until it was nearly out of sight. On a vantage point about a quarter of the way up the hill, Tony and Allison paused to survey the island. From what they could see, it was small and uninhabited. The dark shadow, which marked the entrance to a tunnel, lay about 100 yards above them. Tony said what both were thinking. To tell the truth, I'm scared. But we have no choice. We can't avoid them all. I agree with what you said. Now I'm going to say something that might sound strange coming from me. I've never been one to conform to rules. But in this case, I think we should have some rules for ourselves. One rule should be that we never separate. There's strength in numbers. Okay, I agree. I suppose we should have a rule about the gun, too. Let's exchange possession of it before we enter each store. Don't forget that bullets are precious. We only get to use 5. How do we decide when to fire? The two women paused to consider the matter. Finally, Allison spoke. I suggest that if the situation allows, we do not fire unless both of us agree. Of course, if there isn't time, the one with the gun must decide. Let's not forget that 9 out of 10 stores are safe, so it's probably best not to fire if in doubt. Hey, wait a minute. Hesitation can cost us our lives. The two women hugged each other. Allison began to cry. She apologized for past wrongs and asked Tony to notify her parents if she failed to return. Despite her own trepidation, Tony tried to reassure her friend that all would turn out well. In a few minutes, the women were at the entrance of the tunnel. Lights affixed to the walls illuminated their path. Ahead lay an archway bearing a sign that read, 9 Lives Mall. As soon as they passed under it, a steel door slammed shut behind them. They had passed the Rubicon. Tony and Allison were standing at one end of a street, perhaps 100 yards in length. Shops lined both sides. The stores at the end were joined so that the ensemble formed a horseshoe. There was no apparent exit except for the archway through which they had passed. Being a subterranean mall, 9 Lives was quite dim despite the storefront lights. To Tony and Allison, the atmosphere seemed eerie. Get the gun ready, Tony implored her companion. Okay, stay close and let's get out of there fast. The women entered the first shop to the right. To their surprise, it proved to be an automobile agency. Car models were on display around the floor. A smiling clerk in a dark suit approached. Welcome to Toychevra Motors. My name is Cyrus. Are you ladies interested in purchasing one of our cars? Actually, we'd just like to have one of your proof of entry tickets, said Allison. The man laughed. I'm afraid it doesn't work that way here. Here at 9 Lives, a customer receives one of those tickets only after some interaction with the vendors. If you are interested in buying a car, how about a simple test drive? But how can you do that, said Tony. There are no roads, and the street out front won't do. Our company has thought of everything. We have a fine indoor track. Never heard of such a thing, said Tony. The salesman beamed. You'll see. There's a wonderful new sports car I'd like to show you. The G7. It seats 4. The women looked at one another. All right, said Tony apprehensively. Right this way, then. The cautious pair followed the man across the floor. There was something unnatural about his manner that disturbed them. At the G7, Tony sat in the rear. Allison occupied the front passenger seat, and the salesman took the wheel. Where are we going? Inquired Allison. We can't drive in the store. Cyrus laughed. I'm going to displace the car just a few feet onto the track. He started the engine, put the vehicle into first gear, and moved it ahead a short distance. Neither of the women could see a track. There we are, the salesman affirmed. Are you ladies ready for your test experience? Suddenly, all the doors and windows of the car locked. Then restraining devices clamped down on the bodies of the women. Panicky, Allison struggled unsuccessfully to remove hers. Hey, I can't get this off, she cried. Don't worry, ladies, it's for your protection. And then Cyrus clamped one hand over the ignition key and floored the accelerator. With the gear in neutral, the car remained stationary, its wheels spinning and its engine roaring. What are you doing? Screamed Tony. Cyrus stayed frozen in place without uttering a word. Over the roar of the engine, Tony shouted to Allison, Turn off the ignition! Allison tried to pull the man's hand off the key, but she couldn't. When she dug nails into his hand, she made a startling discovery. Tony, this isn't a man. The recognition that a robot had a vice-like grip on the controls magnified the women's anxiety. Terrifying seconds passed before Tony spoke. They're trying to kill us. Carbon monoxide is building up in the car. We don't smell it, but in time we'll just pass out and die. I say we shoot him. Allison took the gun out of her jacket pocket. Holding it against the head of the driver, she commanded, Turn off the engine now! When Cyrus failed to comply, Allison pulled the trigger. Much of the robot's head blew away, shattering a window glass. Though unnerved, Allison managed to move the mechanical hand away. Turning the key released the restraints. Safely out of the car, the women heard a sound resembling the ring of a cash register. On a counter near the exit, they found a machine from which extended 2 proof-of-entry tickets. As they were leaving the store, an electronic message flashed on a screen near the door. Thank you for visiting Toyshevra Motors. Please know that we are an environmentally sound company. None of our vehicles emits toxic waste products. On the sidewalk, the 2 women leaned against the wall of the shop and breathed a sigh of relief. We made it, said Allison. Yeah, but don't be too happy. We've got 9 more to go. What's more, that sign on the screen means that we wasted a bullet. As bad as it looked, that was not one of the deadly situations. But how could we tell the difference? I don't know. Over a loudspeaker, a masculine voice smirked, Watch out for the street imps. What does that mean? Asked Tony. Nobody told us about them. At the far end of the street stood 8 or 10 gnome-like creatures. All were armed with knives, maces, or pickaxes. Spying the women, the demons ran in their direction, screaming hideous sounds and brandishing their weapons. Instantly, Tony and Allison dashed across the street into a shop and closed the door behind them. Pressing their bodies against the door, they hoped to prevent the imps from entering. In a short time, they relaxed when the outside pressure failed to develop, and then they looked about. The women were in a crowded German beer garden. Oompa music blared loudly from a band at one corner of the room. The only empty seats appeared to be in a booth at the far end of the room, opposite 2 stout, fair-haired men of middle years. Is it all right for us to sit here? Tony asked. Of course, one of them replied. We always like half lovely ladies sitting with us. As Allison and Tony seated themselves, the speaker introduced himself as Fritz and his companion as Carl. The women introduced themselves. Then Allison muttered sotto voce to her friend, You know that these are robots, don't you? Tony nodded. Fritz clapped his hands to attract the attention of a waitress. "You like some beer?" he asked his guests. An affirmative reply sent the waitresses off to fill the order. When the beer arrived, Tony took out a wallet. Fritz waved a hand. No, we pay. It is," he looked at Carl, "our gift to you." A strange look came over Carl's face, as though he had belatedly understood the punchline of a joke, and then he burst into laughter. "Ja, das ist gut. A gift. Yeah, a gift," he said. Fritz laughed heartily, too. Tony didn't comprehend. As she lifted the stein to her mouth, Allison put a hand on her arm. At the same time, she subtly shook her head. Then Allison spoke out loud to the men. Excuse us for a moment. We need to use the restroom." Puzzled, Tony accompanied her friend. In the restroom, Allison explained, "I had a couple of years of German in college, but just in time I realized what their joke was. The German word gift means poison in English. They put poison in our drinks. When we go back in that booth, we must not drink under any circumstance. Stall, do anything, but don't drink." As soon as the women took their seats again, Fritz said, "Drink up! Let's have some fun!" He and Carl smiled and raised their steins. But Tony had a suggestion. "Why don't we dance first? That music is wonderful." The men yielded to their wish. Soon the two couples were engaged in a lively polka. The music ended with the dancers far from their seats. Allison smiled at the men. Let's do one more dance before drinking. Wait right here, I forgot something." Allowing no response, the woman left her companions and pushed her way through the mass of dancers to the booth. Quickly, she interchanged the steins on the table. Then she rejoined Tony and the two men. The second dance was livelier than the first. At its end, all participants were perspiring profusely. "We need some beer to cool off," said Carl. He winked at his companion. After a loud "Prost," the Germans quaffed the brew before them. Tony and Allison pretended to drink. In moments, the two men collapsed. Without a word, the waitress handed Tony 2 proof-of-entry tickets. In the street, Allison said out loud the question that was on her mind. Was it really poison? If so, we're safe in all the other stores. "That's true," Tony said, "but we've got to assume that it wasn't." "As much as I hate to admit it, you're right. Where do we go next?" Tony pointed to a store. With no imps in sight, they crossed the street. A sign identified the store adjacent to the car agency as the Third National Bank. Before entering, Tony slipped the gun into a pocket of Allison's jacket. She also whispered into her friend's foe, "Be careful not to show that gun unless necessary. We don't want anyone to shoot us on the pretext that we were planning to rob the bank." Inside, an elderly male security guard was posted near the front door. A dozen customers stood in line at cashier windows. Glancing about, Tony and Allison were unsure of their next move. A cheerful Asian woman in a business suit approached. "Hello, I'm Mrs. Aritomo. May I help you?" Tony stammered a few unintelligible words. Undaunted, the bank agent inquired farther. "Are you here for a loan or to open an account?" Allison blurted out, "Yes, we're thinking of investing a large sum of money in this bank. We'd like to know something about your security system." "I can appreciate your concerns. Statistics indicate that bank robberies are on the rise, but I assure you that the security standards of the Third National Bank are of the highest order. Let me show you some of our safeguards." While Mrs. Aritomo guided her clients around the bank, pointing out safety features, the two women maintained a wary surveillance of the scene. At the vault, the escort invited them inside. Tony entered with a guide. Suspicious, Allison did not follow. Suddenly, Mrs. Aritomo stepped outside and slammed the door shut. After trying unsuccessfully to reopen it, Allison ordered the bank official to do it. The latter responded with a smirk. Without removing her gun from the pocket, Allison pressed it against the unyielding woman. "Open the door now," she commanded in a firm voice. Instantly, Mrs. Aritomo's face projected its former geniality. "Why, certainly." When Tony emerged from the vault, the official apologized. "I certainly hope that I didn't frighten you. I simply wish to give you the opportunity to see firsthand the security of our vault." Unconvinced, Allison took hold of her friend's arm. "Come on, Tony, let's go." Allison was about to request proof of entry tickets when a masked man, armed with an Uzi, burst through the front door and gunned down the security guard. Over the screams of customers, he shouted, "Everyone shut up and get down on the floor." Bank tellers put all 10, 20, and $50 bills in a plain bag. "You have 2 minutes to do as I say." Tony and Allison joined the other customers on the floor. Before the time had expired, the bandit grabbed Mrs. Aritomo roughly by the arm and asked, "Are there any obnoxious foreign customers here?" The bank officer nodded in the direction of the Americans. Bending over the two women, the bandit said, "It's a shame, but in bank robberies, sometimes innocent people die." As he lowered the barrel of the Uzi over Tony, Allison shattered his head with a shot from her gun. Another robot. Mrs. Aritomo walked straight to the women and gave them proof of entry tickets. Into a beauty salon stepped Tony and Allison. Two plump Thai women with bulbous lips and highlighted hair introduced themselves as Mickey and Thong Thok. "A haircut and some color today?" asked the latter. "Just a haircut for us," replied Allison, hoping to egress as quickly as possible. Preceding the cut was a required shampoo and rinse. The stylists seated their customers at chairs adjacent to large basins. After wetting and shampooing the hair, Mickey filled the basins with water, and then the stylist forcefully shoved the heads of the clients into the basins and held them under water. Tony and Allison struggled without success to raise their heads. From under the protective cover that had been draped over their clothing, Tony pulled out the gun and awkwardly managed to press it against the body of her abuser. Mickey immediately released her firm grip. Standing up, Tony pushed Thong Thok to the side, enabling Allison to rise. The latter was gasping for air. Mickey apologized with a smile. "I guess we pushed too hard," she said. Dried off and repositioned in adjacent chairs, the Americans regretted their decision to suggest haircuts when they observed Thong Thok brandishing a pair of scissors like a swordsman. Did they detect a wicked gleam in her eye? Tony essayed a ruse. She spoke to her friend in a voice loud enough for the stylist to hear. "Allison, do you remember the lottery that I told you about?" Allison knew nothing about a lottery, but she played along. Well, yes. Well, I think we should tell these women about it." Good idea." Their curiosity piqued. Mickey and Thong Thok looked at one another. "Ladies, this is your lucky day. Just recently, my friend and I overheard a conversation about a lottery that is exclusively for Thai nationals. Obviously, the contest is not fair. The speakers already knew the winning numbers. Hearing them say the numbers, we jotted them down. The drawing for the contest is tomorrow. But not being Thais, my friend and I cannot profit from our knowledge without the aid of at least one Thai citizen. How would the two of you like to be millionaires?" Miki and Tong Tuk squealed in delight. "Tell us," said Miki. "As soon as we finish the haircut," said Tony. "I have additional information that will blow your mind." This statement altered the original plans of the stylist. Now they rushed to complete the job. When they finished, Miki and Tong Tuk crowded Tony, imploring her to tell at once all that she knew about the lottery. Pointing to a red speck on the floor, Tony said, "That is the key to the lottery. It's been right there, under your noses all the time." A puzzled look crossed the faces of the stylists. Almost at once, they got on their knees with their heads together near the speck. Tony aimed the gun so that one bullet would pass through two heads. The shot scattered metal fragments across the floor. A ringing chime on the wall indicated the location of the proof of entry tickets. Outside on the street, Allison upbraided her friend. "That was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen you do. You wasted a precious bullet. We had already tricked them into interacting safely. They would have given us the proof of entry tickets." "But you know they were planning to kill us with their scissors, don't you?" "So what? We can't afford to waste bullets for revenge. They are not real people. This is all a game. To win, we've got to be smart. We can't let our emotions control us. Remember, we get only 5 shots for 10 stores. We fired 3 in the first 4 shops. That leaves us 2 for the next 6 stores. Who knows what's waiting for us in those places?" After a pause, Tony spoke. "You're right. I let my emotions run away with me. I just wanted to get back at them." Tony choked up. When it appeared that she would cry, Allison hugged her. "It's all right. We'll make it. We just have to be smart." At that moment, the sounds of running feet caught the attention of the women. To the left, they saw with horror a dozen street imps running in their direction. Tony and Allison ducked into a shop just in the nick of time. Even with closed eyes, an outsider could tell in an instant that it was a pet shop. The air was filled with animal odors, the chirping of birds, and the whirring of wheels pushed by hamster feet. With no sales clerk in sight, the two women walked cautiously down the aisles past cat and bunny cages. The sight of a Skye Terrier puppy with wagging tail and mirthful mouth brought Allison to a halt. "Oh, look," she said, bending over the enclosure. "Be careful," Tony warned. Oh, don't be silly. He's so cute. He couldn't harm anyone." "Don't be so sure. Be suspicious of everyone and everything. That way we'll get out of here alive." "Oh, I suppose you're right." The women worked their way to the rear of the store. There was still no signs of a sales clerk. Suddenly, an intercom voice emitted an ominous warning. "Someone has carelessly left open a reptile cage. 2 adders are now loose on the floor. The one from North America is perfectly harmless, but the European specimen is quite deadly. Protect yourselves until help can arrive." Tony screamed and climbed on top of a large monkey cage. Allison soon joined her. "Oh, I hate snakes," Tony shouted. "I can take anything but snakes." "Me too. Adder, subtractor, I don't care what kind." The women searched in vain for signs of the vipers. "What are we going to do?" Allison asked. "Wait for the help to arrive, I suppose." A tense half hour elapsed. Still no help. "I'll bet no one is coming," said Allison. "They said just that to keep us here, just to keep until the snake goes away, until the snake gets us." "As long as we stay off the floor, we're probably okay," suggested Tony. "Look all the way across the room to the entrance. Between here and there is almost a solid row of animal cages. If we climb over the tops of them, we can probably make it all the way to the entrance without touching the floor. Do you think they'll give us proof of entry tickets without talking to a sales clerk? Well, they should. It's not our fault if there are none available. Let's go anyway. This is an emergency. The plan seemed to be working. The women were about a third of the way toward their goal when suddenly the store lights went out. What happened to the lights? Screamed Tony. Who knows, but don't stop. We got to keep going. Groping in the dark, the women crept over the cages, eliciting outcries from the animals. Within 10 minutes, Tony, who was in front, made a joyful discovery. She touched the edge of a counter which stood near the entrance. Moving onto the counter itself, she helped her companion join her there. At that moment, the lights came back on again. Intense fear replaced the brief gladness that had been triggered by the reappearance of the lights. A foot in front of the women, entwined around the cash register, was a brown and black snake. Tony was so frozen with fear that she could neither speak nor move. Though trembling a bit, Allison removed the gun from her pocket. To ensure a steady aim, she rested the gun hand on her friend's shoulder. The bullet sent the snake flying through the air. At once, the cash register opened to reveal a pair of proof of entry tickets. With no imps in sight, Tony and Allison casually crossed the street. We're halfway there, exulted the former. Yeah, but we've got only one bullet for the second half, retorted her partner. Allison handed the gun to Tony before they entered the shop. It was a sporting goods store. To the right, an assortment of water skis hung from the ceiling. To the left, a golf display featured a one-hole putting green. Encountering no sales clerks, Tony and Allison advanced down an aisle, past fishing and weightlifting equipment, until they reached a small archery range. Tony stopped there. For her, archery had always been a fascinating sport. While Allison examined a bow, Tony walked to the far end of the range to look at the rather unusual target. It was mounted on a large panel with metallic appendages on the sides. Curious, Tony asked a passing sales clerk to explain its design. It's difficult to put into words. If you'll simply press your back against the target and stretch out your arms, you'll understand its design at once. Though uncertain how such action could clarify the design, the young woman complied. Instantly, the metallic pieces clamped around her wrists, binding her to the panel. Almost simultaneously, at the other end of the range, another sales clerk, who had been demonstrating the use of the bow, forced Allison to fire the arrow that had been aimed at the target. The arrow struck 2 inches over Tony's head. Horrified, Allison dropped the bow, ran to the target, and released her friend. A smiling clerk, identified on a name tag as Andy, asked, "Wasn't that fun?" With a scowl on her face, Allison replied, "You almost killed her." It was a bit close, wasn't it? But most of our customers find that exercise exhilarating. We call it our William Tell Overture. Maybe you'd prefer something more sedate. How about bowling? Fine, said Tony. Anything. Let's just get away from here. The women followed Andy to a single-lane bowling alley. Pointing to it, the clerk said, "We call this the Big Bang. I think you'll see why." He pushed a button that activated the device. When the pins were in place, Andy made a suggestion. "To begin, we should play a conventional game." Allison said, "I didn't know there was any other kind." After rolling the ball down the lane and knocking over only 5 pins, she added, "I'm afraid I'm not very good at this." "I can see," said Andy. "Let's go for Big Bang Bowling." While the women gave each other puzzled looks, the clerk reset the pins. "I'll demonstrate first," he said. Pressing another button produced a new set of bowling balls. Unlike conventional balls, each of the new ones had a fuse attached. With the aid of a pocket lighter, Andy ignited the fuse of the ball in his hand. Then he bowled it swiftly. As the ball traveled down the lane, a heavy transparent curtain fell suddenly in front of the bowlers. When the ball struck the pins, there was an explosion. Fragments of metal and plastic flew down the lane and struck the curtain. "Now that's a strike," exclaimed Andy. "Our customers always get a bang from this kind of bowling. Later, I'll show you ladies an even more exciting version of this game by having one of you stand near the pins. But from what I've demonstrated, it should be obvious that anyone can be successful in Big Bang Bowling." Andy pressed a button and a sweeper cleaned the lane. A second button raised the curtain and a third reset the pins. "What shall we play?" asked the clerk. "I just love Big Bang Bowling," said Allison. "But before we try it again, I'd like one more game of conventional bowling. I've never gotten a strike. Please explain what I'm supposed to aim at." "Well, just roll the ball between the pin that's right in front and one of the other pins closest to it." I'm sorry, but I still don't understand. Would you do me a favor? Walk down the lane and touch the pins you mean." Just as Andy was about to touch the pins, Allison ignited a Big Bang ball, rolled it down the lane, and pushed the button for the protective curtain. In the explosion, fragments of Andy combined with those of the ball and pins. The ring of the shop's cash register informed Tony and Allison that their proof of entry tickets were available. The companions emerged from this experience feeling both elated and exhausted. They delighted in having destroyed the enemy without using a bullet. But the constant tension was draining them physically and emotionally. Like soldiers at war, they suffered combat fatigue. With the street clear, they took a few minutes to relax. A cigarette and a deep breath later, the women entered the next door. To their surprise, it appeared to be a storage depot rather than a commercial establishment. A large, dimly lit space contained miscellaneous goods in boxes scattered about the floor. There was no one in sight. Allison said, "Let's go." As she turned toward the door, Tony put a hand on her arm. "Wait," she said. "It's almost evening and we're tired. This looks like a perfect place to rest. I wish we could just rush through all 10 stores and get it over, but we can't. People make mistakes when they're tired, and we can't afford any mistakes. Let's get some sleep before continuing." The women used the restroom in the facility and drank some of the water that they carried, but there was nothing to assuage the hunger they felt. Opening a box labeled carpet samples, they made a makeshift bed. Despite a plan to alternate guard duty, the exhausted women both enjoyed a full night's rest. About 6 a.m., the sound of running feet and screeching voices awakened them to the realization that the imps were active. The noise flowed up and down the street rapidly. Allison and Tony assumed the creatures were seeking them. The clamor continued for 4 hours. Not daring to budge from their refuge, the women had plenty of time to evaluate their past performance and to plan future strategy. Allison suggested ignoring the rule that limited them to 5 bullets, before Tony reminded her that disobedience meant that they wouldn't be picked up. An inspection of the storage room proved to be profitable. In a box, they found bottled water. One discovery was bewildering. About 20 large beehive-like containers were lined against one wall. With padding, they seemed like big doghouses. The external din ceased shortly after 10. Opening the door a crack, the women peered into the street. They could see imps standing at its far end. Tony handed the gun to Allison. Then the pair dashed across the street and into a store before the imps could reach them. The aroma of roast chicken overwhelmed their senses. Until now, they hadn't realized just how hungry they were. To the right of the entry, a rotisserie was slowly turning over breasts, thighs, and drumsticks. Watching the juices drip caused saliva to flow in the mouths of the women. Tony quickly squelched the temptation. She understood clearly that they must not consume anything from the mall. Allison, however, had a weaker will. Maybe it would be okay this time, she suggested. Remember that 9 of 10 stores are safe. No, exclaimed Tony emphatically. We don't eat anything until we get off this island. With that decision behind them, the hungry pair advanced to the counter, where 2 butchers greeted them. How may we help you 2 ladies? Tony was in a quandary. To earn proof of entry tickets required interaction with vendors, and yet the purchase of meat might tempt Allison. Deciding that she must purchase uncooked meat, Tony ordered lamb chops. She was surprised by the reply of the man with the name tag, Henry. Help yourselves. When Tony failed to act, the clerk explained, this is a self-serve butcher's shop. Just go in the walk-in freezer, select your meat, and bring it to the counter. Union rules. Recalling the bank experience, Tony whispered in her friend's ear, stay out of the freezer and keep your hand on the gun. After Tony had entered, Henry rushed to close the door. Anticipating such a move, Allison waved him away with a gun. The women had learned. Tony wanted to leave the freezer as soon as possible. Without searching for lamb chops, she grabbed the first piece of meat within reach. At the counter, she spoke to Henry. Will you please wrap these short ribs for me? Sorry, lady. Remember, this is a self-serve butcher shop. First, you have to cut the meat and then you wrap it. If you come this way, I'll show you how to operate the cutter. Mention of a cutting device made Tony apprehensive, but she followed the man nevertheless. It's a little dangerous because you have to put your head and fingers close to the blade. Here we are. Just rest your head on the edge of the counter so your eye can follow the line of the cutter. Place your right hand at this spot and with the left, push the meat toward the blade. Pushing a switch, the butcher started the machine. Tony swallowed nervously as she began to push the meat. Suddenly, the butcher's manner changed. You're much too slow. I'll help you. With his firm pressure on her elbow, Tony's hand and forearm were moving rapidly towards the blade. As Allison took out the gun, Tony screamed, shoot! Instead of obeying, Allison seized a meat hook on the wall and slashed the butcher on the arm. As he released his grip, the cash register ejected proof of entry tickets. The name of the next shop was Hocus Pocus. To the left, holographic wraiths were twisting slowly in a blue light. To the right, a clerk was demonstrating card tricks to a seated couple. Tony and Allison pushed ahead. They rejected the offer of a magician to saw them in half, but the illusionist would not desist even as they retreated. His last words were, not only will I show you the trick, I'll give it to you at half price. The friends continued to move about the store, bypassing most displays. Eventually, they reached a counter bearing a sign that read, Meet your twin. Intrigued, the women asked the salesman to explain. It's simple, ladies. Here we create exact duplicates of customers, and then they have the unique opportunity of observing themselves in person. How is that possible? Asked Allison. The reply was unexpected. If you haven't noticed, all people at Nine Lives Mall, except for occasional visitors, are mechanical. We have prefab robots available that can be adapted to match almost any description, and in a short period of time. How would you like to have a twin? Allison smiled. Why, yes, I'd like that. Then step this way so we can make a scan of your body. How long will this take? Imaging itself is very brief, not much longer than an X-ray. But adapting the basic robot to conform to the scanned image requires about an hour. Tony was leery, but Allison was enthusiastic. Oh, I really want to do this. I've never heard of such a thing before. Anyway, you've got the gun. Just keep a close watch. When Tony relented, the magician told Allison to step into a chamber that resembled a telephone booth. Tony kept the gun ready. At the flip of a switch, intense light shone down on the cubicle for about 15 seconds. When the light extinguished, the young woman stepped out with no apparent injury. I had a slight tingling sensation, that's all. To pass the time, the pair spent the next hour watching various tricks of illusion. Finally, they were instructed to report to room 8. In the room, the magician pointed to a chute in the wall and told the women to slide down it. With her habitual caution, Tony hesitated to plunge into an unknown space, but Allison was willing to assume the risk. After minutes of wrangling, neither would yield. When Tony warned that they could be sliding into a pool of crocodiles, the magician laughed. I assure you there's nothing to worry about. All that's down there is the alter ego of this young lady. Let me show you. Placing his head into the opening of the chute, the illusionist shouted, Effie! Turning back to the women, he said, I call her Effie, but her real name is E.F. From somewhere at the bottom of the chute, a female voice replied, Yes? Identify yourself, said the magician. I'm the twin of Allison, but my name is E.F. I'm all alone down here. Allison prepared to go down the chute. Tony tried to stop her. Are you going to believe that? Why not? What can we believe around here? Anyway, I'm really curious to see my double. Curiosity killed a cat, retorted Tony. I'll take the chance. Okay, sighed Tony. I'll be right behind you with a gun. Allison slid down the chute. Before she could follow, Tony heard her companion's voice. Oh my God, I don't believe it. Tony, you gotta see this. Tony went down the chute. She landed on the floor of a circular room, the walls of which were formed by distorted mirrors. Allison was there beside her. The walls turned continuously, revealing and closing passageways between the mirrors. The women could see their own reflections in constant flux, now coiled and convoluted, now billowy and ethereal. They also noted a separate entity identical in shape and color to the reflection of Allison. Mesmerized by this swirling scene, the pair stood transfixed until an arm suddenly reached through a passageway and yanked Allison into its space. Before Tony could react, the aperture closed. Hearing her companion scream, she tried desperately, but unsuccessfully, to find an opening in the walls. Into the room came the voice of the magician. Don't worry about your friend. Worry about yourself. I told you that the robot is named EF, but I failed to say what those letters stand for. EF is short for Evil Force. She has been programmed to kill any occupant of the mirrored room. You now face a singular problem. A woman will soon be released into that room. You must decide whether she is EF or your companion. Making the wrong decision could cost you your life or the life of your best friend. The next moments were nerve-wracking for Tony. She pivoted about constantly to prevent an attack from the rear. All the while, she kept a vigilant eye on the mirrors for reflections and openings. Suddenly, into the room sprang Allison, or someone who looked like Allison. The person spoke. It's okay, it's me, Allison. Tony did not let down her guard. She pointed the gun at Allison. How can I be sure? Oh, the other woman may look like me, but she can't know the things I know. You're right. What do you know that the other woman would not know? Well, how about that trick we played on the witch at the Four Seasons? That was way before we came to this island. With a smile on her face, Toni lowered her gun. But just as Allison approached to hug her, a second Allison burst into the room. Wait! Don't let her get near you. I'm the real Allison. Unsure of what to do, Toni forced both women to stand back at a distance from each other. And then she asked the most recent arrival a question. What trick did we play on our last day at the Four Seasons? You mean what we did to the old witch on the veranda? Oh God, thought Toni. Did she just hear that? Or does the robot have Allison's memory? Out loud, she asked another question. What's the name of the woman who sent us here? Madame Ling. Oh, this is a nightmare, thought Toni. Soon, both women were insisting that they were the true Allison and attempting to approach her, but Toni kept them at bay. Minutes passed. While Toni stretched her brain for a solution, the voice of the magician reappeared. Congratulations! You are a very clever woman, one who's not easily fooled. But you're taking quite a long time to make a decision. Foreseeing the possibility of an impasse, we have programmed the robot with a second option. Check your watch. In exactly 5 minutes, Effie will explode. Toni's brain raced. She might ask a hypothetical question as, what would Hank probably say to Louie at a St. Patrick's Day party? But was she willing to stake her life on the answer? At 4 minutes, Toni had a sudden inspiration. She commanded both women to face the wall at once. Then, removing a pin from her shirt, she stuck it into the calves of the women in rapid succession. When Toni saw blood running down the leg of the woman on the right, she blew Effie away with a gun. Instantly, the overhead roof opened and the floor beneath began to rise. At entry level, a magician handed them the 2 tickets. Out on the street, Allison consoled a distraught Toni. You did the right thing. Without destroying that robot, you couldn't be sure that it wouldn't explode. Toni remained silent with her head down. I know what you're thinking. 2 more stores and no more bullets. That's scary. But here's an idea to consider. The creatures of this mall may not know that our gun is useless. Perhaps we can bluff. In a tight spot, the gun may still come in handy. When the women had recovered sufficiently, they searched the street. No imps. They walked easily into the next shop. Displays of dolls and model cars met them at the entrance. Overhead, a large sign announced Tiny Tots Toys. Several parents navigated the aisles with small children in tow. Remembering the pet shop, Toni thought it best to caution her companion. Don't be fooled. In this store, everything is going to be cute and attractive. Keep in mind that everything you see has the potential to kill. On one aisle, they observed mechanical dogs doing tricks. When Allison stopped to look, Toni grabbed her by the hand and led her away. She didn't let go until they were in the clothing section on the far side of the store. Lacking both customers and sales clerks, that part of the shop seemed a safe place to turn her friend loose. Allison was admiring some tiny dresses when she heard the crying of a child. Then an adorable little girl emerged from behind the garments. She was about 5 years of age. Her reddish dimpled cheeks, her puckered mouth, and her chubby body would have made her a prime subject for a Rubens cherub. Upon questioning, the angel revealed the names of Tricia and loss of Mama as the cause of the tears. Toni patted her on the head and promised to find the parent. Taking the hand of her rescuer, the girl began to walk as though she knew the way to Mommy. Tony allowed her to be pulled along. Ahead was a woman who might be the mother. And yet, when the prospective parent turned to the right, Tricia continued straight ahead towards a door that said exit. The sign puzzled both Allison and Tony. Allegedly, the mall had but one egress. Tricia demonstrated the error of their thinking. As she yanked open the door, bright sunlight streamed in, revealing a view of the island and the ocean. With horror, Tony discovered that to step out the door would be comparable to leaping from an airplane. There was at least a 200-foot drop down the mountainside. Tony held back, but the girl was trying to pull the two of them out the door. Fortunately, the adult's superior weight and the aid of her companion sufficed to overcome the resistance of the child. Still, the girl would not yield. She continued to pull with all her might. Worse yet, Tony discovered that she could not free herself from the vice-like grip of the robot. Unexpectedly, Tricia threw herself through the door, knocking Tony to the floor and nearly pulling her out into space. While the women lay in pain, trying to support the weight attached to her hand, Allison took out the gun. Gripping the barrel, she hammered at the robot's hand until it finally released its hold. Tony and Allison watched Tricia fall to the bottom of the hill. At the store's entrance, they picked up their proof of entry tickets. Emerging from the toy shop, the women discovered there were no more stores to enter. With care, they recounted all the previous episodes. The total was 9. Where was the 10th store? Suddenly, they remembered the storage depot. That must be it. Despite the extended period of time spent in that place, they had failed to seek proof of entry tickets. It would be easy. For once, they wouldn't have to risk their lives. While the pair were enjoying this thought, Allison conceived of a flaw in their thinking. There's one thing we've overlooked. In order to get the tickets, we're supposed to interact with the shop's personnel. How are we going to do that? The storage room is empty. I see what you mean. There must be some way to get the tickets. Maybe there are instructions on a wall sign. Well, let's have a look. The storage room appeared to be just as they had remembered it. It was dimly lit, cluttered with boxes and the strange beehives, and devoid of people. While searching for the tickets or clues to them, the women reminisced about their experience. They laughed about how they had outwitted the Germans in the beer garden and Effie in the magic shop. Robots were no match for them. After high-fiving, they began to relax. Their bodies and minds ached from the prolonged challenge. Tony made a suggestion. We still haven't found the tickets. Frankly, I'm not worried. There's plenty of time. Today's only Wednesday. The rescue boat doesn't come until Friday. Right now, we're dead tired. Let's take a nap. Waking up fresh, we should be able to find the tickets more easily. If we don't find them, it's probably because we have to wait for the storage room workers to come back. Tomorrow, we can spend the whole day lying on the beach. As before, Alice and Tony curled up on a pile of rugs to rest. About 2 hours into their sleep, a droning noise awakened them. The storage workers had returned. Armed with knives, maces, and pickaxes, the imps leaped upon the reclining women, slashing and hammering viciously. Late Friday afternoon, Alfredo was walking near Dock 11 in West Palm Beach when he spotted a friend. Hola, Felipe. Hello, my friend. I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you'd be picking up those beautiful women at this time. No, I was told not to go. You mean they're not coming back? Felipe shook his head. What a shame. So beautiful. And they seem so smart, too. They were. Madame Ling said they almost made it. They solved every problem but one. Something about the beehives. What does that mean? I don't know, my friend. Perhaps someday someone will tell me. End of story. Not exactly the sort of shopping mall you're familiar with, is it? and not the happy ending to which you've been accustomed on this channel. The next story will be much more pleasant. After all, Christmas is approaching. Although I really don't have a true Christmas tale to present to you, you will enjoy the one that will appear on December 15th. G-rated, it's a fun-filled adventure for the whole family. Thank you for watching Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery.